Robert Fernandez, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Now, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been working in IT and cybersecurity for about 2 decades now, probably a little over that now. I'm a CISO at a financial firm, DRJ, the investment center. Been CISO for, I want to say, about 7 years now. I focus a lot on, obviously, business resilience and, business risk and things like that as a CISO. We are a smaller shop, so I do wear a lot of hats. I had my share of disasters and business continuity that I had to go through, especially with like Hurricane Sandy and things like that.
Mhm.
Obviously, COVID was the big one that everybody had to deal with.
Sorry, what was that one?
I haven't heard of that. Let me write that one down.
I remember days when there was no CISO. It didn't exist. My vice president was in charge of anything and everything IT. What have you seen change over these years since you've become the CISO?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I've seen change is who the CISO reports to, and what their role is. I think that it was, and I think in a lot of cases it still is. It varies depending on the organization and who you work for and how they handle it. In some cases, they're reporting to a CTO, or in others they're going right to the CEO or to the board. So I think that that's changed more. I think that they have more of a bigger position on the board and in an executive chair than they used to, which I think is important. So I think obviously with all of the incidents that we're starting to see, that we've been seeing with ransomware and especially ransomware right now, which I'm going to be speaking about tomorrow morning. You just have to have somebody that's responsible for cybersecurity for the organization. I don't think that the days of, yeah, for smaller organizations, of course, they have to make do with resources that, what they can do with the resources they have. But in regards to, having somebody that's responsible for owning the cybersecurity program, I think that's a really important thing to have. And that person needs to have access to the board.
Yeah, having access to the book. What? I'm going to take a step back. It's as though now everyone involved with business continuity or disaster recovery or information security or cyber security wants time with the board now. How do you manage that, considering the threats that are out there, when everyone, more than ever, wants time with the board?
Yeah, well, I think it has to be sort of baked into the structure of the organization to begin with. I think that that's something that needs to be scheduled regularly, whether it be quarterly. Like I said, I'm in a smaller organization, so luckily we're able to meet weekly. So that's everybody from the chief compliance officer, chief operations officer, CEO, chief marketing officer. Like, we're all in the same room at least once a week. So always staying kind of up to date with what everybody's seeing across the board, which I think is important too. Is not just the CISO going in and telling and briefing the board about what they're seeing and what they're doing, but also kind of getting the opinion of others and see. So what is your team seeing? Like, are they seeing an uptick in threats in this area? Is there something you're concerned about? And really, a lot of people automatically associate a CISO with cybersecurity, which is true, right? But I think the more important aspect of the CISO is business risk, overall business risks, right? So understanding the culture of the business, understanding what each department, each division does, and how they function is a really important aspect of this.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you said it's important for the CISO to understand business risk, because we often find a lot of CXOs are still, even though they have that chief title, they're kind of siloed. Well, I only deal with data, or I only deal with this, that, and the other. And I think you kind of lose sight of at a chief. The word chief is in the first part of your title. You are responsible for the business holistically.
Yeah, 100%. And the days of departments being siloed is non-existent anymore. I mean, if companies are still operating that way, they really need to reevaluate that, because
Yeah.
everything comes together. I mean, if you really if you look at what I mostly focus on, which is business risk and cyber risk, you really you have to look at everything. You have to look at the human aspect. You have to look at, the leadership aspect of the organization. Is the message coming down properly from the top to is the culture being delivered, and is it really a true culture, or are we just doing lip service, right? So like a lot of these things are really an important aspect of it. And I think that, you can't separate one from the other anymore. Everybody has to work together in this, because, if you do silo things, you're going to miss a lot of things that way.
But that still does exist. 'Cause I know, I can guarantee you, both James and I are probably working with companies right now that do have silos. How do you go about breaking that down?
Yeah, I mean, really, to me, it almost always comes down to education with any of it. And I think the first person you need to educate, or the first people you need to educate, are the executives, right? Because it does come down from the top. I see it a lot where, especially in the smaller organizations, like where they don't really have access to, a cybersecurity practitioner or a professional. And what they end up doing is, they end up relying on their IT people, and I think I think it's a misallocation of, understanding, and it's just a misunderstanding of the way that cybersecurity works, and it has to be holistic. And I think that's the first way to get through that barrier, is to educate that business leader, that business owner, and say, hey, this is why this approach is wrong, right? These IT people are another business risk to you. Right. So you have to have this person that's managing that business risk as well. And you don't want, the fox to guard the hens. Right. So that's sort of the approach that I like to take, is just education. Make sure they understand, make the recommendations, but also explain why you're making the recommendations, and show them the impact on what could happen if they don't, take that advice.
So tell us a little bit about your session. You mentioned you were speaking tomorrow, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm speaking 8 a.m. The general session, and I'm speaking about OSINT. I'm using open source intelligence for a way to a business to become more resilient. And really the whole thought process behind that is that we don't have a crystal ball, but we can go out and we can look at things in the dark web, and we can look at things that are taking down organizations. Look, MGM recently, United Healthcare. You could just keep naming these organizations that are being, just debilitating ransomware attacks that are taking them down for. United Healthcare, I think, said, they're not going to be fully recovered for months.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So my perspective of this, coming from more of the cybersecurity background, is I really do believe that you need to use the tools that we have available to us. And again, we can't be siloed. We have to use the cybersecurity tools, the analyst tools that we have, which in our case is a lot of times OSINT. And we look on these dark web forums. Right now, there's a big, I'm seeing a lot of Stealer logs. And if you're not familiar with Stealer logs, so Stealer logs have been around for a while, but they're becoming more popular now because of ransomware as a service. So while in the past you had to have some sort of technical skill and some ability to be able to build these tools, this malware, and distribute it, now you can just sign up. Anybody with no technical background whatsoever can sign up for malware as a service, and they can go and either package it up. It could be like something like a pirated video, and they can package it into that, or pirated software, or they can send a phishing link, or just a drive-by malware site, like those sorts of things. And these are one of the ways that companies are being affected. And I'm even going to talk about a case study tomorrow of a company that was affected specifically as a result of these Stealer logs. And what these logs do is they go in and they steal files. And that sounds scary enough, right? But they also steal your browser information. So if
that is scary.
Yeah. So your history, if you're storing like the autofill forms. So when you go to a form and put in your your first name, your last name, your address, your phone number, your credit card, and the browser asks you if you want to save all that stuff. So for the next form, you don't have to fill it out again.
I would say no.
Yeah, those because
Yeah, I say no
that's
as well.
what Steeler logs are going after. They're going after those. And they're going after a lot of things. They're going after your browser footprints, and they're going after your device footprints. And they're also stealing your cookies, which now with your credentials, if they have your credentials through the Steeler logs, if they have your cookies, if they have your browser and your device footprint, now they can basically imitate you, use that cookie, and if it's a persistent cookie and you clicked remember me on this device, that persistent cookie can also be used now to bypass MFA. So even if you have MFA involved, right? So again, it's knowing that this information is out there about your organization in a timely manner, and being able to say, okay, this person was infected, right? And we're seeing it a lot more now, again, because of COVID, because of a lot of work from home, a lot of contractors, things like that. So you're not having company managed devices, right? So you're not really seeing it from that perspective. But if you can hopefully see that from the perspective of OSINT, if the device has been compromised, and then say, okay, Joe here has been compromised. You're gonna need to wipe your device clean. You're gonna have to start from scratch there. We're gonna have to go, log you out of all active sessions. We're gonna have to, you're gonna force you to reset your password. We're gonna have a talk to you about what you're downloading and what you're doing on these devices, right? Right? I mean, ideally, you really want to lock down the devices so that those things can't happen in the first place. But we all know with a lot of BYOD policies and things like that, that doesn't happen all the time.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Right.
I was just going to say, your core audience here at DRJ are business continuity practitioners, maybe operational resilience practitioners, and kind of a theme that Alex and I have heard over the last year or two is they're concerned that cybersecurity and information security is just going to kind of swallow up all aspects of risk management. So, to our audience who's a BC or op-res practitioner, what's a way that they should be working with their CISOs, with people like you in their organization?
I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier about the silos, I think that we can't act in silos anymore. We're all a really important part of the team. When I was asked to speak at this event, I said I'm going to be surrounded by people who know business continuity way better than I do, right? So like, I'm not going to go and talk to them about business continuity directly, because they're just going to be bored to death, right? They're like, yeah, we already know.
What the heck is he talking about?
So for me, like, I'm like, well, how can I add my sort of aspect of like how they can get better using maybe something that maybe some of them didn't consider yet, right?
Yeah.
So I think having those communications, again, making sure that people who are leads for business continuity and disaster recovery are sitting in those executive meetings and those board meetings and having those conversations. It doesn't have to be weekly, but at least quarterly, I would say. But I think it's the responsibility of all of the leaders and chiefs and board members to have that open door policy to say, let's talk about these things, because these attackers are relentless, and we're gonna keep seeing more cyber attacks. They're gonna keep getting easier, and I think that we need to have that open door where we're discussing it openly and saying, we're not going to beat this unless we join together as a team and do it together, right? So I think there's always going to be a case for business continuity, disaster recovery. I mean, I deal with it because I wear a lot of hats. Most CISOs deal with it a little bit. But I think that we all need to sort of have the perspective where we're working as a team, we're working together, and we're all putting our skill sets and our knowledge together to work together on this.
I want to touch on something you mentioned a few minutes ago, and I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. We all know that hackers, it's not the pimply kid in the basement anymore. It's organized crime in governments in some places. But correct me if I'm wrong, did I hear you right saying that these hackers or these groups can go to other hackers or groups and get malware as a service?
Yeah, that's correct.
They're
Yeah,
actually creating products for each other to go and create this?
Yeah, so what you were mentioning too about a lot of the more organized crime, Think of it the way, if you've ever watched any of the Pablo Escobar, right?
Yeah.
He's not out there on the street selling the drugs, right? He's a distributor. He's bringing them in, right? And he's creating that avenue for the lower level people to go out and sell them, right? And then they're going to make a profit off of that, but he's making a profit altogether. So a lot of the threat actors, nation states, professional, or quote unquote organizations, like they're out there. They were doing this, all of it, from soup to nuts. Like they were designing the malware, distributing the net malware, collecting if there's ransomware involved. They were doing all of it, right? So now instead, they have those people now say, you know what, we don't want to be distributors anymore. We just want to be wholesalers. And they have the malware as a service, and anybody can go in and sign up. You get your, flavor of the day malware that you can buy, right, as part of the subscription base. You'll get tech support through the service and everything. And you can basically just say, okay, this is what I want. Here's my mailing list. Just like if you were to go into MailChimp, just upload your Excel spreadsheet, and I want this to go out to everybody. And then when it comes in, I'm getting a cut, and the service provider is getting a cut. So that's how this is really working a lot today. They do call it malware as a service. So it falls under the software as a service umbrella.
Wow.
But it's crazy to think about. But you're right. That's what now the script kiddies are doing, right? Because now they don't even have to be script kiddies. They just need to know how to sign up for this portal.
Wow.
We were talking to some of the guys from Netflix earlier today.
Those guys are the best when it comes to resiliency. By the way.
Given the popularity of all, like you said, the Pablo Escobar series and all the drug kingpin series in Netflix, I think we should pitch like a malware as a service crime docudrama series on Netflix.
Yeah, why not?
That's a great idea. I think it's a great idea. I mean, it's people like to be entertained, right? So if you can entertain people and educate them at the same time, I'm all for it.
Well, we'll have to cycle back with TJ and Gail from Netflix.
Yeah.
See how we can script it.
I think so. Yeah, how do you deliver that?
Learn something new.
So what's one takeaway from your presentation as of tomorrow or from right now, would you want listeners to really understand?
I would say just know your footprint, know what's out there. That's what these attackers are doing every day. They probably know more about your organization than you do. So I would say, go out there and use OSINT to investigate yourself, to investigate your organization. I investigate the organization and the executives as well. We look for domain names, we look for email addresses, we look for names, if you put them in quotes, different things like that. So you want to look for any chatter on like Telegram accounts and like dark web if they're talking about your organization. I mean, obviously, especially if you're like a public company, or you might even be, for whatever reason, like a government entity where you're there might be some hacktivists that are going to be wanting to target you. So just know what your exposure is out there, and incorporate it into your planning. Do tabletop exercises on that as well. Like, we just found all of this information out on the dark web. What do we do? Right? And work with, don't work in silos. Again, work with your CISOs, work with your CEOs, work with everybody in the organization, even, and make sure the employees understand it too. Understand the importance of not saving things into the browser and things like that. But my biggest thing is understand your exposure, put something in place where you can respond to it in a timely manner, because time is of the essence. The one case that I'm going to be talking about, I think it was 4 months. The admin employee was infected with Stealer logs, and 4 months later, the company was attacked.
Wow.
So there was a four-month window.
Sat and watched the network for 4 months.
It's not well. This was specifically regarding Stealer logs, right? So what they did was they went into somebody. They probably didn't even target this user. He was probably just downloaded something and fell into it. Got infected. The logs were stolen from his computer, and now the attackers, the threat actors, had this. And then I'm assuming that they probably don't react to it all at once because they probably have thousands of victims that are coming in all at once, and then they probably have other tools, I would assume, that they're using to go through this data and see, okay, what's the juicy bits that we can get out of here, and how can we use it, right? And then it probably just took them that long to really find, and then from that, I mean, it could have taken maybe 2 months, and then maybe pivoting the other two, but it was a 4-month time frame that the Steeler logs were. That the user was infected with the Steeler logs, and we know this based on the data that was out there in the dark web.
Wow.
So in regards to response, and resiliency, right? If that could have been prevented, if this organization would have been monitoring for that information and would have made, know what accounts this user logs into, shut them down, log out of all sessions, things like that. Have a little talk with the user again about, what they shouldn't be doing. Maybe and then going back again internally with the board and saying, maybe we do need to, look at investing in some devices that are company owned.
Create some internal training courses, when people take the wrong step.
Yeah.
You need a review.
So what do you say to an organization who says, well, we do BYOD because it's less expensive?
Well, I mean, that's all part of, a risk assessment, right? If you would include that into your risk assessment and, obviously the organization would need to put a value on their assets that would be affected, downtime, assets, right? You can show them historically how, it's this one user, because they have their own device that's not part of your company, your patching policy and your, you don't have your EDR tools on there, so you're not getting any insights into these devices. And let's see what that costs, right? And compare it to what the cost of some of these companies, and the best people to go to for real numbers is insurance companies always. Because they're seeing this. You could go to NIST, you could go to all these other industries where they're looking at numbers and looking at things and looking at changing policies and putting controls in place, and they're changing maybe yearly, if that, right? I mean, when was the last time NIST, the cybersecurity framework was changed? We just got an update after a decade or so. But insurance companies are reevaluating the risk and the value every single day because they're going to have to be the ones to pay it, right? So they know what the risk is of not having a company-owned device. They know what the risk is of not having EDR tools or multi-factor authentication, things like that, right? So that would be another conversation to have. Is maybe we need to speak more with the the insurance agents that we're working with and the underwriters and say, hey, let's have a relationship here because we're having these policies that are going out. We want to be better. So how are we going to be better? What are you seeing? And is there any way you can update us on a more real time basis so that we can stay on top of all of these threats that are coming? Because they're seeing it real time.
Yeah, I've actually read postings on LinkedIn where there is mention now of insurance companies getting them. They're always seen as an afterthought. Do we have disaster? Do we have disaster coverage? Yeah, we got.
They're
okay,
right of boom.
Yeah, okay, fine. Then we don't need to worry about it until after the fact. But what you were just saying, talk to them in a more proactive manner so that you're much more up to date and they're not something to look at after the fact.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would say that a lot of them, I wouldn't say a lot of them. I would say some of them are starting to be more proactive in general. So you're starting to see more cybersecurity insurance carriers that are being more proactive. They're being more involved. The audits that they're performing pre-contract and during contracts is starting to become more comprehensive. Right. So I think that's a good thing because they are the ones that are going to have to pay it out in the long run. Right. So they know all the numbers. Right. So they're the best ally when you come to the planning stage. But you're right. I mean, they're always thought of, what is it, right of boom, where, the disaster just happened and now we call them. But, you should be planning, with them from day one and understanding what they're seeing real time as risks and what you could be doing better. And in turn, you're going to end up lowering your, premiums, lowering your deductibles, getting a higher coverage because now you're doing more, right? And they're going to reward you for that.
Yeah. and lower insurance is always good.
Yeah, exactly.
So if somebody wants to reach out to you or find you with questions for some of the things you've just said, or from your presentation tomorrow after they've attended that, how can they reach you?
My LinkedIn account, I do have one of those. It's Robert dash or underscore. I have to look it up. Sorry. You can look me up on LinkedIn. It's Robert Fernandez. I'm the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer at the Investment Center.
Yeah, and it works because that's how I found you.
Is it? Okay, there you go.
I was going to say, if you would have said you found him at the dark web, that would have been funny.
Poking around. Yeah.
Probably
Hey.
more.
Robert, thank you so much for
Great.
sharing your time.
Thank you for having me.
Today. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Good luck.
Take care. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And yeah, all the best tomorrow in the session.
Thank you.